Hey folks, Knox at IT Inspired here. We are continuing our SQL journey here together, and we are going to dive into a little more advanced querying using those commands we learned in the last video where we were talking about select, from, where, and order by. But one of the things we got to talk about first is how to handle nulls. If you see when we go back to person, I'm just going to select these real quick. You can see a lot of these records here are nulls. And it's really important that you understand what that actually means. Null has a very, very specific meaning, and that really means unknown. So it could be anything. In this case, with a middle name, it could be John, it could be Lee, it could be Jeanette, it could be anything. So it's when you build queries around the word null, it's really important that you keep that in mind. And what we can do is we can actually build our queries and tell them how to handle a null value in one of these records. So without further ado, let's just dive right into that, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So let's pick on record number 4 here, where we've got Rob, a null middle name, and Walters. So if I build my query and I say select first name, middle name, last name from person, where let's just say business entity ID equals 4, because we know that's the guy we want to talk about. We can look at these results very cleanly here. Okay, so we've got first, middle, last name, Walters. Now what I can do is I can concatenate these fields to make a new field called full name. Let me show you what I mean by that. Let's do select first name. In fact, you know what? Just to save us a little bit of time, you don't have to watch me type these again. We'll take this, and instead of doing comma, I'm just going to put a plus sign in here and do it like this. Let me put a little space. Okay, so because I've got middle name here, and the middle name is unknown, first name plus middle name plus last name, SQL's going to say, I don't know what the results could be. I know what the first name and the last name is, but because that middle name could be anything, the result could be anything. If I click execute, I'm going to get an answer of null. Let me clean this up a little bit here. So now if I took this query, let me paste it down here, and let me just remove the middle name and show you what it would do. So now it's going to do first name, a space, and last name. Look at what it's going to return to us. It's going to return the name of Robert Walters. Now you can see immediately we didn't specify a column name, so it says no column name. We can clean up our results a little bit by using the as command. And let's give this column name a name of full name. If I run the query again, it now gives me a full name. So you could even add some columns to this just to kind of show you how it would look cleanly. Let's do business entity ID, comma, and run it. Just to clean it up a little bit, I'll show you what that looks like here. So you can see how this would work with a full name. We've got a business entity ID and a full name. So how do we want to handle this null? Like when we saw this original, the original query, if I just did select star from person real quick. When we did this original query, we saw that some of these records did have middle names, or middle initials at least, and some didn't. So if I were to just say select all of these like this without specifying a where clause, right here, you're going to see a lot of nulls. Oh, sorry, this one didn't have the middle name. Oops, let's see this one. There we go, that's better. So you're going to see a lot of nulls, and we don't want nulls for the entire name. We want to be able to handle this. So one of the very first commands that you can do that is very specific to T-SQL is called isNull. And isNull will take a null value and replace it with whatever you set. Let me show you what that looks like. First name plus, we're going to do the space plus is null. Now, what is the column that we are going to be using here? This column is middle name. And what character do we want to put in its place? Let's say H. So to recap what's happening in this command really quick and make sure we're totally on the same page, we've got select our first name, then a space, and then an isNull command that's saying return to me the middle name. Whatever's in the middle name column, give it to me. And if it is null, if there's nothing in there, if it's truly unknown, I'm forcing you to put the letter H in its place. So let's continue and do space and last name from person.person. And when I run this command, you can see a lot of these that would have been null now have H's in their place, but the ones like record number 11 here does have a G. Record number 12 does have the B. So the H really only shows up if it's null, or of course if it was an H in the first place. The second way that we can do this is, let's say you don't want to force it to replace it with a letter. Let's say you just want it to ignore a null column. That's a different command called coalesce. And let me kind of show you how that works. This one is a little bit trickier. I'm going to clean this up. I'm going to write a really clean query here. And we're going to do tab. And I'm going to say coalesce. And you can see it instantly goes pink. I'm going to open my parentheses. The first scenario I want you to try is first name plus space plus middle name plus space plus last name. And if that returns a null because the middle name column was null, go and just try the next entry, which is first name plus last name. I'm going to close my parentheses and I'm going to say from person.person. So watch how this handles it. So if we take a look at maybe Kimberly H. Abercrombie here, what we're expecting her to do is show up as just Kim Abercrombie. And you know what? Just to make this even cleaner, I'm going to give this an as full name. Look at that. So now it does go through the first iteration of this command, first plus middle plus last. And if it does check out okay, it returns this to us. Look, we even got a Kim B. Abercrombie. If it doesn't check out okay, it just returns first plus last name because that's what it went through the iteration. And you could have as many different combinations as you wanted here, guys. If we weren't sure that the first name or the last name, any of those could be null, we would just do first name to try that. And if that doesn't work, last name to try this. So those are the two main ways you would handle null scenarios. You would probably use coalesce more than likely in a scenario where you're manipulating text. You would probably use isNull more than likely in a scenario where you're manipulating numbers. If it's null and you're going through this huge long calculation, if one of those characters is null, your whole calculation is going to be null. So maybe you would want to set it to something like 0. So that way, you know, if it is null, then just put it in there as 0 and we'll just kind of skip right over it. You know, that could throw off your averages because then it would be counted and like an average as a value that would have been null. Anyways, so that is one of the big issues that I wanted to tackle today with you is how to handle nulls. Some other little advanced querying things that I wanted to show you. Let's go back to pick on person.person. And I'll hit F5. Oop. Got to have a from clause, guys. F5, there we go. Let's say you wanted to take a look at this modified date a little more carefully. Let's go to order by modified date, descending. So now we've got these things sorted by the most recent records first. But let's say I only wanted to see the 5 most recently entered records. Like we know something went on with those 5 records, but we don't know what, and we know they were the most recently entered ones. Let's take a look at the top 5 most recently entered records, and we'll just pick on first name, last name again. And just for the sake of cleaning this query up, give me just a second here while we clean this up. So I'm going to say select top 5, first name, last name, from person, where we're ordering by the most recent dates first. So what it's doing is it's first going to sort the data by the modified date, so it's got the records sorted by newest first, and then it's going to pull out the top 5 records from those columns that I specified. So check it out. You know what? Just to prove it, modified date. Isn't that neat? So it kind of just goes to show you that we didn't even have the modified date in our select clause, but we could still order by it. You can even do where clauses on these items too. So if I wanted to have where modified date is older than, let's just make up a date of January 1st, 2015. So we're probably looking at records around December 2014. So I'm going to do less than or equal to, so older than or on the date of January 1st, 2015, ordered by that modified date. So this is going to return to us records at oldest January 1st, 2015, and the top 5 of those items. Let's execute it. And now the records did change, I believe. So let's take a look at what those modified dates actually are and run that. Take a look. Now we're looking at June 30th, 2014. So apparently nothing happened in between July and December until we get some records from 2015. Okay, so that is some good ordering and querying the top 5 based on a date. You may end up doing stuff like that. Now, the last one I'm going to show you is more or less that you can do something, not that it's necessarily the best way to do things, but it is important that I show you how to do it, and that's called a nested query. So to dive into it, let's go back to person and show you what we're going to work with. All right, let's say I was tasked with finding out the business entity ID of anyone whose last name began with the letter W. So we kind of covered this one on the last time. That's not a big deal. So let's say select business entity ID from person, where last name like W, right? We're comfortable with this. So this will return to us all the business entity IDs of people whose last name began with the letter W. So we have this information, but let's say we needed to actually get some more info about these people. Let's say, okay, well, now I need to know, based on the results, based on the business entity IDs that I have here, I want to know just what their first names are. I'm not necessarily interested in the business entity ID. I just want to know what the first names are. So we're going to do select first name from person.person, where business entity ID in. And I'm going to open the parentheses. In fact, you know what? Let's do this. Let's clean this up a little bit. Let's do it so this is a little more organized. Business entity ID in. And I'm going to highlight this chunk and tab it over and then close the parentheses. So do you see what it's going to do here? It's going to select the first name from the person table where the business entity ID is in this resulting set. Remember how the in command worked? It was like an equal statement where we had a list of items. And what the nested query does is it performs a query that returns to me the results that I'm going to use for this business entity ID in. Watch what this does. Check it out. And just to prove it to you that those were all people whose last name began with the letter W. That is the nested query. So is that necessarily the best way to do it? Maybe not. You might have been able to do it in a different way that may have been a little more efficient. But again, that returned to us 1,075 rows in sub 1 second. So that's not too bad. But nested queries do typically have a performance hit because it does have to execute queries with inside queries. But they're also extraordinarily common. So I wanted to make sure you saw these a little slightly more advanced select statement items that you can do here. Okay, get out there and try it out.